Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Let's get over the map update and then we'll talk Ramstein and other things. So at the top here, Russians were really trying to push, but Ukrainians here have quite strong positions. So there has been essentially just a very minuscule advancement, and it's nothing to write home about. We've heard that both I've heard that Russians are both pushing towards the Yampolivka, Terny, and Torsky, but also there are reports that Ukrainians are fighting back. So here we are basically fighting exactly on the same terrain as we're fighting before. But with the difference is that a couple of months ago it was Ukraine that tried to push and advance. Now it's Russia that tries to push and advance, but they're having very little success. Battles are fierce, reports are quite bloody, but so far Ukrainians are holding their strong positions. Bilohorivka, Russians are non-stop claiming that Bilohorivka is taken. They've been doing it I think every second day by this point. So if you randomly hear somewhere that Bilohorivka is taken, it's not. It's just Russian disinformation. They entered some parts of the city and they're really trying to essentially undermine that position for so long now. It's a very, very hard position for them to attack into, and they're struggling. So don't believe if you hear anything about Bilohorivka. The same kind of is on this salient. As you can see, our long favorable village that I completely mispronounced last time. It's Sako and Vanseti village for the population that was living there before the war of 3 people. But yes, Russians were not able to advance to the north. Now, Bakhmut. So if you read the title of the video, and basically the story and situation of Bakhmut and just generally the Russian offensive so far is that me, Georgie here, I've overestimated Russians a lot more than I should have. Russians have shown that whatever they've been doing, like my assessment last Sunday run out essentially a deadline for Bakhmut, by which point I said, well, at that point, Russians should probably already kind of push the Ukrainians out. But so far, they're really struggling. They're slower than turtle pace. They are barely advancing. And this is interesting because what's happening right now is the Russian offensive, right? Russian offensive, this one doesn't happen as we would expect of the 24th of February, at least not in all places. And here on the Bakhmut direction, what essentially is happening is that in some areas there are still Wagner forces. Wagner forces are sent in front. They are the meat shield for the normal Russian forces. And then Russian forces, basically, as they capture new position, they continuously supply new and new fresh units to the battle lines. Right now, the battles in Bakhmut are extremely intense. So my estimation was that as much as Ukrainian warriors are strong, right, that the fresh forces of Russians would be able, just by the sheer quantity of them, just to overcome this position. But as we've seen at Vuhledar, they are so incompetent that they cannot even use the quantity that they have correctly. They are still advancing, but the tempo of advancement is minuscule. This tempo is a joke. And people saying, well, maybe you're just underestimating Ukrainians. Well, that's pretty impossible because for me, every single Ukrainian is a high tier level god that is fighting on his position until he cannot longer fight. Maybe physically, maybe he's out of ammo, maybe like something happened, he got wounded or anything, right? So Ukrainians, I overestimate on purpose for myself. But the Russians are not able to do it. They are not able. They have an overwhelming strength in this area. They are sacrificing hundreds and thousands of lives here. They're throwing whatever they have at the positions, and they're really struggling. So, as my 2 weeks of Bakhmut that I gave Bakhmut are now over, I will not make any predictions because I believe that whatever I was thinking about Russians, I need to reassess my judgment. But what was happening? Well, finally, because of the position was collapsing so hard, I told you about this salient over here. And this allowed basically Krasna Hora to get encircled from basically three sides, or like almost like four, like because they were able to advance also from this side, from south side, and also from the east side. So Krasna Hora, at this position, Ukrainians saw that they just cannot hold it. Like it was just like completely all 360-degree defense, and they moved out back to Paraskoviivka. Right now, there are extremely tough fights in Paraskoviivka. The road so far, I don't have confirmation that the road has been cut, but I think the Russians are close enough, so it's dangerous to supply anything on that road. So right now, basically, the northern side of Bakhmut still holds, and it holds on Paraskoviivka, but it's quite kind of desperate. So I would not be surprised if Ukrainians will declare that the northern side of Bakhmut is untenable. Remember, Paraskoviivka is the last holding point for the north side. On the south side, the fighting again is intense, but here Ukrainians have a lot stronger positions than Russians were expecting. And here Russians just non-stop trying to advance to the road, advance to Ivanivske. They get hit in the face, they fall back, they try again. I hear time and time again that, hey, Russians have attacked. There's fighting right now at the southern side of the Ivanivske village. Day goes by, and I hear the report, hey, Russians have tried to cross the field, and they're now inside of the southern side of Ivanivske village. So I'm hearing this pattern repeated again and again and again, which only means for me one thing, that they are being kicked out every time. But this is obviously not coming easy. Again, I've described you the wave tactic that Russians are using. So for the next, at least, I think a month and a half, right now is the middle of February, so until the end of March, we should be expecting that Russians will continue doing this wave attack and so on. They still have the reserves. Right now, the new pictures have appeared that they have camps actually with fresh forces that are being prepared. And my estimates and a lot of analysts are saying that this is for rotational purposes and supplementation, like the next waves of attack. They are positioned around the Belgorod Oblast, and they're positioned around Voronezh Oblast. Sorry, that's not Belgorod Oblast, but Kursk Oblast. I was a little bit wrong. So around Belgorod, around Voronezh Oblast here, and Kursk Oblast here. So Kursk Oblast is around Sumy. Now, some people started speculating. Does that mean that Russia will now attack again the north side of Ukraine? And I already told you when we were discussing the plans about Russian potential invasion from the north, that if they do, that would be the best case scenario for Ukraine. Because right now, Russia is concentrating forces in a very specific directions in Donbass. If Russians will, for some reason, decide that they want to attack other directions, that they want to attack also from the north, it's going to be the stupidest plan that they can execute. And it's going to be definitely 100,000% driven by politics, which means that it's not impossible. So if they do, then at that moment, when you get reports and you get your local news station crying that Kyiv is about to be encircled once again because Russians have opened the northern flank, at that moment you look in TV and says, that was freaking dumb. So be aware of that and be on the lookout for that. As for the south side, it's very important around Vuhledar. Well, I will not say about the situation. The situation is continuing the same. Russians are trying to send in forces. The forces get obliterated by artillery, and they're continuously doing that. Right now, I believe they're in trap of sunk costs. I believe that they just want to, like, as an addict gambler, just to try and more resources at already bad bet, to try to see maybe that they can get something that they can say, well, it was a lot of resources dedicated, but we achieved something. And right now they just don't have anything to show for. But I don't think they're going to achieve anything. What unfortunately has happened here, and people misunderstood what I was saying, and other also reporters were saying about the situation in Ukraine, is they thought that the whole offensive of the Russians has already failed. So when I was talking about that the Russian offensive is not going to plan, that does not mean that it's failed. The offensive is just basically ramping up. They still have plenty of fresh forces. We see this by the same camps that I just mentioned in other regions. They also have camps in regions that are closer towards Donbass and whatnot. So Russians still have plenty both of armor, old armor, yes. Half of it not working, yes. There are some places struggling for ammunition, yes. But they still have stuff to throw at Ukrainians. They still have the capabilities to execute this attack. So no, the offensive has not ended and it's still going on. It's just it's completely not going to plan. If we take something like Bakhmut, whereas the major effort is, then the tempo of advancement and the resources dedicated are completely impossible. Or if we say at the Vuhledar, then the attack fails outright and they have zero results. And I think with that, I will end today's map update. Before we continue to the second part, please like, subscribe, and share this video. It's really important so the right information about the frontline situation in the Ukraine gets around and we beat all those Russian propagandists. And I want to start with saying thanks. So if you didn't know, we actually helped some Ukrainian soldiers on the front line. This was the first donation stream that we did, just the last one. We were able to gather over $4,000 to support Max and Pasha, guys that are running channel The Flashpoint. And we get them the finance that they need to buy drones for the surveillance, as well as we have a person named Gord that was kind enough to support a drone from his own stocks, which is amazing. I cannot be more impressed by this community so far, and we're going to plan to do more these kind of direct supports for Ukraine. So again, if you want to support Ukraine, check out the first comment under the video. If you're donating to me, subscribing to Patreon and so on, you're supporting me, and I do donate some of the, like half of the profits to Ukrainian cause, but I would advise you first and foremost to support Ukraine directly. We have Ramstein that is happening right now as I speak here. So there has been a lot of speculation what we can expect from Ramstein meeting. Should we expect jets? Should we expect long-range missiles? And I think jets are extremely early because I think that the most precise indications was from the Polish officials when they said that the negotiations right now are at early stage. I think that's fair, but I think I'm really glad that the topic is up there. As for long-range missiles, well, firstly, the GLSDB, as far as we are aware, already agreed upon, but also UK said that they are interested in supplying some long-range capabilities for Ukraine. So I'm hoping to hear that. We do hear, unfortunately, that US is giving some kind of weird excuse saying that if they provide ATACMS to Ukraine, then they will undermine their own security. Well, it's a complete Schultzing, unfortunately, in my perspective. I don't see how that will work for multiple reasons. And just to give you a few main long-range weapons for US is not ATACMS, it's not ground-based, it's the air, it's the air assets. So ATACMS in Ukraine, ATACMS for US as an army, as a land-based platform to send missiles is kind of an obsolete to an extent concept. So that's just the one, like, kind of like a big thing. Like, it's like, why do you need ground launched missiles if you have so many planes that can do the same thing just 10 times better? And the only way, for example, why HIMARS are so effective in Ukraine is because Ukraine does not have nearly enough air assets to have an air domination and air superiority, which US can have in pretty much any conflict. No one can even closely match it. Going into the other discussions for about this Ramstein, I think the most important part is going to be the discussion of very banal things. Ukraine has been asking for more artillery, more ammo, more just general supplies of every kind. Biggest request was for Ukraine to finally stop sending just support for Ukraine from whatever you have, and maybe work together to support a specific type of operation. I believe that message was very clearly delivered last time when Zaluzhny also came to Ramstein. He didn't participate, as far as I'm aware, in Ramstein, but he was definitely there, and they were discussing with the US counterparts, I would expect, how to best proceed with the strategical offensive and what would be the plan, and maybe they try to see what kind of plan would work the best. And now it seems that the plan has been approved. So there has been a call for allies to supply resources for the execution of that specific plan, to find the resources that are necessary so that plan can be executed. I'm expected it to be the plan to essentially liberate the southern part of Ukraine. That would be a very nice operation. I don't expect Crimea is still there, but we're going to see, and I believe that this is the target, and we're going to see essentially all of the, not a lot of loud statements, and it's going to be mostly like silent. We'll say, okay, we're going to just supply some specific artillery, we're going to supply this number of rations, this number of ammunition, yada yada yada. So everything that to prepare for the specific offensive. With that as also in mind, there are now rumors circulating that the next package that US is gonna say will be happening around around the year date of the war, and it's again rumors. It was supposed to be by Biden, that when he's going to be visiting Poland, and he's basically going to state that a new supply package is going to be around 10 billion US dollars, which is massive. But we'll see. I don't want to speculate right now. We will find everything quite soon. But what I want to talk about additionally today is something for us as a mental thing for us in the West. I always talk about that this war is not only about the war in Ukraine, it's also a war for us, for democracies, the Western way of life, rule of law, everything that we value, to stand against the oppressive regimes trying to enforce their wills of the countries that they find weaker, and use violence as a way to solve things. If the war in Ukraine will go, for example, into Russians' favor for any reasons, then we're going to end up in a lot more dangerous world for all of us that are living in the West, and we're going to be subject to attacks and uncertainties in the future. We do not want that. So with that said, my biggest gripe was obviously the visit of Hungary to Minsk, the foreign minister of Hungary visiting Minsk and starting negotiations and finding the peace solution, how it's called. This is relevant. Why? Well, because Hungary is actively going against the community. Like we have in NATO, for example, right? We agreed that Russia and, well, Belarus is basically a puppet state at this regime, at this time of Russia. So Russia is our main adversary. So Hungary then, and Orban's government basically stating that, well, we're going to go and we're going to talk with the adversary of this club, and we're going to try to do something not in the common party line, one might say. This is worrying, and this is worrying for us first and foremost, because Hungary is an independent country. They can choose their own allies, they can choose their own destiny. If they don't want to be in NATO or European Union, they can always exit. What it does put pressure on us to make checks. We didn't do our due diligence when Russia was getting stronger and the authoritarian regimes in Russia starting undermining us, the democracies inside Europe and US. What I'm saying here is that Hungary is very clearly becoming a very existential danger for us. Well, maybe I've a little bit just too worrisome, but Hungary is actively undermining our communal agreements. And the question is not what Hungary is doing. Again, independent country, they can do whatever. The question is what we are doing with Hungary. And you know that I have a very, very clear opinion on what to do. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all. Slava Ukraini, guys, and I'll see you next time.